Okay, good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
I'm hoping for a fun, not fun, I'm hoping for a valuable and maybe fun discussion today. Are you in a good mood or what's the state of the country?
I'm in a fantastic mood, but boy, we picked quite a week to take off, right?
Oh my God, the last 2 weeks. And
Yeah,
there's
the
seems
last two
like there's
weeks.
been,
I don't know. Did anything happen in the news lately?
it seems like I can't even imagine. We've had a whole full year of stuff in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So do we have to like recount those things, kind of like what happened on Thursday and then what happens on Friday? Is that helpful to society to monitor the news like that?
I guess I've been like many times uh, when it feels like events are coming quickly, I'm often feeling the lack of news. uh, I bemoan how I don't have better news sources and sources who I can trust. And I
Well,
mean,
speaking on that, let me get to a zinger. I haven't looked this up, so I don't know if it's true. I saw it on like five different Facebook friends accounts in five different, only semi-legitimate, and I didn't try to research. I truly do not know. Did the administration, our administration, are they seriously considering nuking Iran?
I don't think so.
Well, but you don't think people are talking? You think that's a fake news
Oh,
story?
people are saying stuff. I mean, I sort of, I have friends across the political spectrum who use all of the different, social media platforms. And boy, I tell you, what people are saying and how they're saying it to each other is shocking on all these issues.
All of them,
And sometimes I'll see something and think that, well, this is so outrageous, and this person's such a serious person. I'm going to go and check and see if this is true. And it's so far in every case, none of it is true.
right?
And which tells me that there's a lot of really bad information that is penetrating to very normal, smart people. Are
I think that's true. And by the way, I think it's going to be on steroids. I think because of AI and made up friends and made up Twitter accounts and made up Facebook people
I
and
think
what they
that's what
say
we're
made up.
already. I think it's already there.
Yeah,
That's where a lot of this stuff is coming from. When you start to look at the sort of news sources that are being shared, a lot of them do look like they are AI generated news stories from suspect, and truly fake news.
well,
Fake
but
news
yeah,
produced
truly
on the
fake. But
sites.
some of our friends that are very thoughtful, very smart, very good people seem to kind of go, "Look what he did this time," and have some link, and he goes, "I don't know." And it
Yeah,
temporarily raises my blood pressure for like a second. I go, "I can't believe we're nuking Iran." And then I have to like calm myself down and go, "Yeah, I should look into this
and
first."
then sometimes you have to ask yourself, like, I'm just going to change this so the person doesn't know, but like, there is no NBC affiliate with those call letters in Santa
Right,
Monica. Like
right,
that's completely fake. Uh,
right.
but people are sharing it and believing it.
Yeah. Okay. But we're still optimistic, or maybe your personal life's just doing well, or something. Why are you optimistic?
Honestly, we have this swim meet called the Tri Meet where
Yeah.
we have to go and sit outside all day long, and it's usually the hottest day of the year. And we got
Okay.
the weather report that it's only going to be 82 degrees, and I
And
am,
you're happy.
yeah, I mean, like, I'm so happy it's not going to be 100 degrees tomorrow that it's
Yeah.
making me feel optimistic about everything in society.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, but you do have your tent, right? You set up a tent and
Yeah, but I'm not going to set up our, like, power misting fans and all that stuff, because it's actually going to be just a beautiful day,
nice.
and
Well,
on the one day that I have to spend outside.
I love that. Well, you Californians crack me up with your save global, climate change power misting fans. Okay,
Yeah.
regulate everything, but not stuff that will,
Well,
you
in
know.
my case, it's solar powered, so
Okay, I'm impressed. Okay, I'm impressed. All right, back on point.
yeah.
Um, it is possible there are administration officials evaluating all sorts of the best weapons to go deep underground to eliminate Iran's capability to have a nuclear weapon. and a nuclear is one of those options. So that's probable that those discussions are happening, right?
I don't think so because we have a large conventional weapon capable of doing that.
Right,
And that's what we would use. I can't. I mean, I guess it would be. I'm saying this is not likely, but it might be more likely that the Israelis would be contemplating the use of some sort of nuclear weapon because they don't have a conventional weapon capable of
right,
doing it. But I think they
and
would be more likely to to use, 100 different
right.
options rather
Okay,
than that.
so let's kind of delve into that. There are four countries in the world that I don't think I can probably go to for the rest of my life because I've said disparaging things about their leaders. So until their leaders change, or until I have diplomatic immunity, or something else changes, I don't think I can go to Russia, North Korea, China, and I loved going to China. I'd like to go to Russia actually, and Iran. Those are there other countries I should probably not go to? I mean, I know there's danger, but
Oh yeah, there's a bunch of countries you should probably shouldn't go to, and
okay. Well, but are there four despotic countries more serious than those four?
I still, yes. I mean, I'd have to look, but I think there's closer to a dozen or 20 of them that are,
That I shouldn't go to, and
yeah.
other good American citizens shouldn't go to. Okay. Um, do would we like to see regime change in all four of those plus those other 16?
Sure, yes.
Yeah. And how far are we willing? I mean, sure, we'd like to, but I mean, I'm sure they'd like our president to change too. How much are we willing to force our Congress or join the military? I mean, all the different or use our economic might, our forces of diplomacy. Is this a real issue? Should we worried about Iran and Russia and China and North Korea? I mean, of course we should, but I mean, like, how should that manifest itself?
Well, just quick point of clarification. Regime change is more than just changing a leader. It means
Oh,
replacing the entire system of government. So,
well,
uh,
that's easy to do, right?
no, it's almost impossible to do. And there's nothing that we can, and this is the hard thing about many issues of governance, but it's especially true in foreign policy, where the United States can create the preconditions for good government to take place in other places, but there's actually nothing we can do to make it happen. We can um, uh, we can merely create the preconditions. I mean, in its most extreme form, let's say our most interventionist, would be boots on the ground, are and security is being maintained by um, the American Armed Forces or something like that. Even in that scenario, it would still be up to the people of that country to create and maintain the institutions of government.
I'm not sure it's still true to this day, but what's the largest embassy in the world? U.S. embassy in the world?
I don't know.
Isn't it Afghanistan or is
I
it
can't
Iraq?
imagine that would still be true. But I don't know. That would that would be
So, but I mean, what my point is Baghdad.
They just said Baghdad, yeah.
Yeah, we have tried Baghdad. Really? Huh. Thanks, Shane. Um, we have tried this really extensively, right, in recent decades, in Afghanistan and Iraq. To put it, I mean, it wasn't just our military. We have huge civil diplomacy efforts to try to teach them the American system of democracy or a similar system, right?
Well, as long as I would say, define recent decades as being since 1945. Um,
Okay, well, yeah. I
you
mean,
know,
1945, we've done it all
because
around the world, though, haven't we?
yeah, but in every case, what we have is a military that is creating the preconditions for um, you know some form of representative government to take place, and that looks different in different places. Military bases in Germany, or and but also security guarantees for Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland. We don't have to have a large military presence in Poland in order to make sure that Poland has a chance to create a vibrant, peaceful civil society.
Which they sure have, by the way, right? You've
Oh
seen those
yeah,
reports. I
absolutely.
mean,
It's one of the greatest success stories in world history. It's really
and,
extraordinary.
and so that's something that we should, as Americans, put a feather in our cap. Kind of our American pluralistic ideas
Uh,
succeeding.
I don't know if it's a feather in our cap. I think the feather always belongs to the people of that country themselves,
I love
like because uh, you can create the preconditions, but we do it for many places on Earth, and not and most places just don't uh, don't take it up.
Okay,
So
well, that's a good transition right there. How likely is it today, do you think, that we are going the path of Viktor Orban? I mean, do we really want a strong leader and don't particularly care about the institutions of democracy in America internally now? It seems like there's a lot of folks, including a lot of our friends, real good people, actually. I mean that good people that would rather sacrifice some freedom for some, decision making, for enforcing our laws. We don't need to. We're enough of this fuzzy stuff. We need to be strong, and we need to compete, and we can't compete in a pure democracy. We need to be a little bit more not author yeah, we need to be a more authoritarian in some ways. There's nothing wrong with being an authoritarian. You have any concerns about us losing our democracy?
yes, yeah, but not just because from two angles, which is that because of the failure of institutions to teach people the value of, we've had so many shows on rule of law, yeah, that the subtitle of this podcast should just be called and also rule of law.
Which is
Uh, but because we have both failed culturally and institutionally in many cases, I would say we're hanging by a thread, and that thread is the judicial branch.
that's,
But
that's way more melodramatic than I would use it. What about our system of federalism? I mean, it's not
yeah,
just the judicial branch. And what about the rugged individualism of American citizens? I mean, it's not just, even if the Trump administration were to win on every single one of the judicial branches, we're all going to vote in a bunch of Democrats in just 18 months. Or, we're not just hanging by the judicial. That's too melodramatic, is it not, Professor?
I'm not sure because even when you talk about that sort of rugged individualism culture, I don't know if that's a majority anymore, and I'm not even sure if it's a plurality. I mean,
Interesting.
if you if you were to look for that particular character trait, there's a version of it in almost everywhere in America, but they also tend to be pretty self-interested, and I think there's pretty good evidence that most people ignore the lawlessness as long as it's lawlessness on their side. Um, you
And
know,
you're
the,
optimistic? I know you're about the swim meet stuff, that personally, but that's bumming me out.
well, I guess the thing that makes me optimistic is to see how bad it's been in previous eras. We saw.
Ah, you are a history professor. So give us some setting. What do you mean it's been bad? Everybody says this is the worst it's ever been. Everybody is saying we've never had a more rogue president. Obviously, conservatives aren't saying. Well, conservatives might be. Obviously, Trumpies aren't saying that. What do you mean it's been so bad in previous eras? What do you mean?
Well, if you think about the application of rule of law,
Okay.
um, there really was no golden age, because in some ways things have been getting better, while in other parts of society things have been getting worse. So,
So give us an example. Flesh this out. Keep going. I like this.
well, I mean, I would just say like uh, give me a decade and I'll in American history, and I mean, just say like, well, in the 1820s or something, uh,
Okay.
I would say uh, large parts of American territory that were completely lawless,
Mm.
meaning it was every man for himself, and that you could say laws were being followed um, only in, sort of medium-sized towns, because even the large cities were, controlled by um, powerful interests and mobs of people, and then the frontier was just completely lawless. So what you'd have are these sort of islands of democracy that functioning, um, but
Well, let's bring it back not within our lifetimes, but our parents' lifetimes. 1950. That's where we need to make America great again. We need to go back to 1950.
uh, 1950, you're talking about halfway through the year of shocks. 4950. This is spies, Soviet spies throughout the American government, Soviet spies penetrating every aspect of American culture and institutions, just, communist spies in every possible place of influence in American history.
So McCarthy was
The
right.
Pardon?
So McCarthy was right.
Well, no, he was wrong because he was accusing a bunch of people who weren't communist spies. But and that's to remind you, that's how Nixon ended up rising to prominence, was Eisenhower saying, "You went after somebody who was an actual communist." Because I always make sure that we should differentiate between anti-communism, which was the perfectly legitimate security concern about Soviet influence in American life, and then versus McCarthyism, which was just accuse people of being communists and hope that somebody's hope that eventually you're telling the truth.
Well,
Um,
hopefully they'll
but
just stop using movies, huh?
yeah, but I'm not even finished with that. You think like the communist takeover of China had just happened, the Soviet announcing that they had a nuclear weapon that was a copy of ours because they had stolen it. Uh, the Korean War starting,
And
which
now you're bumming me out. So the 50s weren't ideal, huh?
well, I mean, the Korean War was just absolutely, it's one of, and Jake might be able to check this out too, but I think it might still be the war that was the worst for any civilian population. I mean, the Korea was absolutely devastated by the Korean War. So, no, I'm not particularly nostalgic. Oh, and I mean, and that's just in foreign policy. Uh, the Truman administration was, flailing. The civil rights was um, uh, they had a strategy that couldn't really be implemented until somebody like Eisenhower took office. Um, and as many things seemed to be in a little, well, I shouldn't say in a standstill. They were still making progress, but I certainly wouldn't want to be black or gay or or Mexican in 1950.
Man, you're okay. You're being persuasive. All right. How about 1960 before the hippies took over? Didn't we get better in the 60s before the hippies took over?
Well, I still don't, wouldn't want, I mean,
Right.
no. The Soviet influence had spread throughout the world, and it was false, but we elected a president in 1960 who believed that we were falling behind the Soviets, and he was getting ready to start a bunch of wars on purpose, and challenge the Soviets. He was, oh my gosh, yeah, Jake just posted 74% of the casualties of the Korean War were civilian casualties. So that is just, like I said, it was absolutely horrible for the Korean people. Um, yeah, and in the 1960s, you're also talking about Mao in the midst of the greatest mass murder in all of human history, killing tens of millions of his own people. Just extraordinary slaughter. A nuclear war probably we were probably at the most dangerous point in world history in terms of the world actually destroying itself. I mean, that alone probably means that in some ways the early 60s were the low point in human history.
Wow. Okay.
If you
Let's
think
go
about
back
it
to
in
that.
perspective of humanity almost killing itself.
I think you're going to say the same thing about the 70s then, and then I actually have sentiments. I was around as a little boy in the 70s, 60s too. But so let's skip the 70s. But at least once Reagan took over, then we're doing well. That's what we mean, right? We want to go back to Reagan times in the 80s.
Well, again, I mean, not to make every era sound terrible, but every era had its progress. But, uh, but some things are getting better and some things are getting worse.
What was
Um,
getting worse in 1982 to 86?
the expansion of the administrative state, um, it-
Under Reagan?
yeah, the continued growth of administrative authority of the federal government. Um, it was in many ways in the wake of Watergate. There's a kind of push and pull of executive authority um, because um, Congress in the 1970s gave all of these new rulemaking powers to the executive branch, which in some ways it seemed like that was being clawed back um, after Watergate, but it really didn't affect the growth of the administrative state. Um, so it meant that many of the things that we would now consider to be um, bad, like maybe a complete disconnect of between reality and good governance and um, federal and executive authority. Um, in many ways, that has a explosive growth in the 1980s.
Fascinating.
Um,
That has led to all sorts of other problems in recent decades.
sure, yeah.
Professor, I'm trying now. I want to try to weave this together a little bit, unsuccessfully probably. So you got to be better than me here. Be sharp
Okay.
here. So, okay, so we've always had problems,
Yes.
even in this wonderful country called America. We've had issues, problems, concerns, and maybe we're actually doing better, even under the second Trump administration. Yes.
Mhm. Yes, I mean there are some areas within the Trump administration that some things are probably getting better.
Well, good. So, would it surprise you if the president comes out in the next week or two and says, "Hey, we might nuke you, Iran. You better come to this deal. We might use a nuke." Would that be shocking? I mean, you've seen what he said over the last 10 years. Would that shock you? Is that inconceivable?
I guess I don't know if he can still shock me.
Right. Well, is that so it's possible?
I would say it wouldn't shock me to hear him say it. It would shock me if he did it because he
Oh
says
yeah, yeah.
completely
I think if
crazy
he did it,
things all the
yeah.
time.
I don't think he can do it. I don't. Even if he says he's going to, I don't think he can. I, I'm actually not worried about that. I don't think he can. I mean, I know he
But
literally
I never underestimate what he is capable of saying.
right. And so, but so he might say that. So we as citizens should what? We should go, yeah, Article 1 powers of the Constitution. No, not Article 1, Article 2. The Constitution has enormous power and form. So he can say and do almost anything he wants, right?
For 60 days, you know.
What do you mean for
But
60 days?
yeah. I'm sorry you cut out there a little bit. You were asking me something about the 60 days. Oh, we lost John. Does anybody want to jump in there? Hey, Bart, you want to channel your inner, or Jake, you want to channel your inner John Brackney and try to guess what he was going to ask?
Go for
So,
it, Jake.
You
oh,
can't hear me.
Oh, wait, he's
Huh?
back.
he's
Yeah,
back.
he's back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jake,
We
you want
lost
to go or
him.
should I just keep going?
Oh, we
Yeah,
were going
keep
to
going
fill
now.
in
We
for
got you
you.
back again. Yeah.
Okay, Professor, what do you mean 60 days? Not every you've talked about the knowledge of American citizens and what they know about government. Yeah, I think I know what 60 days means, but I have a political science degree. What do you mean the president can do whatever he wants within 60 days?
Well, there are a number. I mean, it's not just one law, but there are many laws that try to rein in the president's authority or require some sort of congressional oversight or approval because the Constitution says that Congress has the right to declare a war. Uh, but presidents have uh, the legal right to respond to an emergency, but ultimately how they respond to an emergency has to be ratified by Congress in some way. So, there's a window, and typically it's sort of 90 days total, where president can do almost anything for 60 days in foreign policy, at least. Um, and and then Congress begins having the ability to shut it down after that first 60 days, and by 90 days, they're
Okay, so he has very, I mean, extreme powers, enormous powers, but so does Congress, should they decide to exercise them, is what you're saying.
oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Jake has his hand up. Let's let Jake.
Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so on this point, Bernie Sanders tweeted out something because, Trump, Iran, Israel, all of that. He tweeted out something and he was saying, like, Trump cannot expand, we cannot aid Israel and expand the war into Iran. It is Congress's constitutional authority to do so. It is getting a lot of traction. I
Mhm.
have tweeted out the details of the War Powers resolution more times than I can count over the last week. But I mean, Sanders is right, but at the same time, 52 years ago, Congress said they formalized it and said, well, the president kind of can do anything he wants unless Congress steps in and stops him. So Sanders is right that it is supposed to be Congress's prerogative, but since the Korean War, we've just kind of let the president, have free reign for a couple months.
And
Yeah.
that's the kind of rhetoric that it keeps bothering me about the opposition to Trump. And it bothers me a lot because his opponents will often conflate two things when there's a perfectly reasonable criticism you could be making. And I just think, why are you being, you know, dishonest when you don't have to be? It bothers me. We haven't talked about immigration, but I was
We're
just
going
thinking.
to in a second.
All right. Well, I don't know. There's been something that's been bothering me about all of the discussions with immigration, and
Move right to it then, because bring it
okay, and it just has to do with how people will immediately begin conflating, and they'll talk about immigrants, and they'll say, "Well, you can't do this to immigrants," and of course, you're not getting us anywhere if you are focused on um, immigrants. When what is happening to
You mean
people
like the
who are
comments were all immigrants and they have constitutional rights and you can't, I mean, that kind of, or what do you,
and often the other thing that's crazy and is that you scratch the surface on some of these criticisms, and they almost immediately go to that the entire American government is illegitimate because we're on stolen land, you know.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I just think, who do you think you're winning over with this argument? Uh, it's completely absurd, but it it never helps you actually solve a problem, and it sometimes makes me think that the people who are talking about this stuff aren't really interested in actually solving the problem. It makes that kind of stuff
Or
makes me
even
think
winning.
that Bernie Sanders isn't actually interested in actually reining in Donald Trump. He is still trying to use Donald Trump. And there are people who try to use Donald Trump by saying that they like him, and there are people who use Donald Trump by saying that they don't like him. But what I wish we had were people who actually were interested in working on these issues and making things a little bit better. but you can't do
Ah,
that as long as you're basing your argument on lies.
yeah.
Uh,
So you're reaching the one of the conclusions I would hope that would come out today. And I love that you're phrasing it in the way you are, because I think I see it every day among real friends. And I
yeah,
don't know if they're being intentional by just keeping the argument going, or I think they want to make the other side look so bad that they'll win the next election. So they want them
yes,
to keep looking bad, and they don't want to solve the problem because they want to get the majority so they can win on all the issues, not just the
yeah.
issues they say
What
they're
I
mad
want to
about.
know is, I mean, we had these protests, the No Kings protests, and I just thought, um, where's your immigration proposal? Because I bet if you actually had an immigration proposal, it would still include how to remove people who are here illegally. But the problem is you can't so that's why you can't have one. because so what are we going to do? We're just going to pretend like there's no provision and no circumstances where anybody could ever be removed from the United States. And I just think, well, that's a non-starter. That's what they're asking for is anarchy.
Well,
Um,
there is a, I don't, it's pretty pervasive. I have been to almost every major protest in Colorado. I missed two for family reasons, but I've been to 8 or 9 protests this year. And I went to the No Kings. I went to 3 of the No Kings. And boy, Professor, I'm telling you, it is really interesting to see suburban people. I mean, maybe 1,000 people a mile away from my house that were not imported. They were not paid. They're not extremists. They're not rock throwers. These are people that look like me and better. I mean,
yeah.
moms and dads in my neighborhoods going out to stand on University and Dry Creek, and 1,000 of them. And then just 2 miles away in Littleton, there's another couple thousand of them. Then I went down to downtown Denver, and I think the efforts of saying 20,000 is probably right. 20,000, and I walked amongst them. I talked to a couple dozen of them.
I probably, yeah, my town has 140, total population of about 140,000 people, and I probably knew 200 or 300 people who were
Yeah,
out there
yeah.
protesting friends, family, but here's at the same time I was thinking about this, there would be the Trump supporting counter protester who said, we have to have laws. And I would want to stop that person and say, what about this TikTok law that
Yeah.
you just keep saying, if you're the person who says, I want the law to be followed, like, uh, how about this clear example of a law that Congress passed and that through no authority, there's nothing that,
Well, and we're all just turning a blind eye to that, aren't we? We're
yeah,
all just kind of living our life, not caring that the law is not being
he
enforced.
just has made up this executive authority that he can apparently keep renewing forever. Um,
We don't care. Congress
and
doesn't care. We don't care.
yeah, nobody cares.
No one cares. Press doesn't care. No one cares.
Yeah, but so I
I
don't
heard,
want to hear a single Trump supporter go run out there and say we want the law to be applied to every single person equally, and that's all that we're doing in immigration is. And he say, "Oh, well, I don't believe you." Uh,
okay, let me tie one more thread into this. And then that I'm done with the threads, and maybe we can have a cohesive conclusion before we go to Q&A. Um, Tariffs. President is fully within his authority to do whatever the heck he wants to any day and change it back and forth, and that's good for America. But both in law and policy, what's going on with tariffs, and why do we not seem to care?
I have absolutely no idea. I mean, I does anybody know what our current tariff policy is with any nation on earth? I mean, I just assume that this stuff is written on crayon, written in crayon in without punctuation, and that just gets torn up, and that people are just, well, we're just going to ship the goods, and so
Somebody will maybe pay
yeah,
some tax on it, or
pay or
maybe not.
not pay, or we'll never. I mean, and it's we're just going to leave it to the courts to sort it out, and you know, maybe some government entity will eventually issue some guidance, but I bet you there's going to be some widespread um, immunity eventually. I can imagine somebody coming back and saying, well, we tried to implement this as a tariff policy, and some company making the argument like there was no effective enforcement or clarity that we should have ever been collecting these tariffs. So how could you expect us to follow the law when nobody knows what the law is? And I
So
think some lawyers
so
are
when
going to make some good arguments there.
So, Professor, when I studied political science back in UNC, one of your alma maters where you taught, I when that would be 84 to 88. I'm pretty sure we had like a whole semester in total through 4 years talking about tin cup countries or banana republics or how the law could change at any time or just they nationalize your mine, just the chaos of countries and what they do just on a whim. They just said the leader says we're doing this now, and not I'm not even talking 1984 stuff. I'm talking about just no, we're not doing that anymore. And no one knows planning. They don't know certainty. They don't know how to invest in that country, so they don't as much. They go to countries that are more stable, and that country remains poor and revolutionary because no one wants to lose their corporation or their home or whatever. You don't want to go buy a home in some country that the country could just take it over and say you can't own a home here anymore. What? So it seemed like we studied that, and then there was this beacon of commerce and liberty and freedom and rules, America, that was different than a lot of the world. Is my maybe I wasn't paying attention in college. Does that ring a bell at all? Does that?
Yeah, and and in 1988, it was probably true because a lot of other countries were worse and we were better. But since 1998, if you look at the old Heritage website under the rubric of regulatory efficiency, you usually see that America is kind of middle of the pack or middle lower of the pack in terms of regulatory efficiency, which usually means that our laws actually work the way they're supposed to. They're being implemented. So I think if you're a business person looking for what we now have is a kind of almost like deregulation through incompetence. The thing that is predictable about doing business in the United States now is the incompetence of the Trump administration.
Oh my
And
God! Now you're depressing me again.
oh, sorry.
It's not just the Trump administration. You're talking about it being a long-term trend, though, that all administrations just over what issues you're talking about. Oh, Bart's
Well,
and look.
I guess it's they're two sides of the evil coin, because on one hand, you have the Democratic version of this, which is we're going to make things so complicated that that we are going to politically favor people by twisting regulations so that it will have the appearance of being lawful, but really what we're doing is the exact same. I mean, I know I've used this phrase before, but this is what I mean when I was describing that Trump is dumb Obama. That essentially, um, that the smart version of this is we're going to use the power of regulation and complexity in order to enact a political agenda, and then be able to say, what, us? We're just following the rules. How dare you? We're just being clever. And we have really smart lawyers who are making the argument for this stuff. And Trump is essentially the wrecking ball who is saying, I'm just going to do it. And leave I'll leave you lawyer, go and find some reason why this is legal later. So in one case, you have this sort of, I guess what I say is the Obama version of this is you hire a smart lawyer looking
Yeah.
for the loopholes that you can exploit and then argue in court. And then you sort of have the dumb version of it, which is I'm just going to do it. And then some of it's going to get undone, or some of it I won't even ever actually do because I can't implement my own policies, but I'm going to take a political win and say that I've done things, which sort of doesn't seem to matter. I noticed Bart took himself off mute, so I
Yeah,
know you're staying on this. Am I way off base here, Bart?
No, in fact, I was actually going to kind of support what you're saying right now. And I think the last like week and a half has been such an example of what you're describing. Like if you look at world affairs, earlier we were talking about the Middle East and everything, our we seem to be having a crisis of, I want to say coherence, but that's not the right word for it. We basically don't have leading politicians right now who are actually capable of articulating something that makes sense.
Yes.
Like when you were quoting Bernie Sanders earlier, I mean, that's very nice that Bernie Sanders said all of that, except that it's totally stupid.
Yeah.
And frankly, I would say that to Bernie Sanders if he were sitting right in front of me. I would say it more respectfully, I guess, than I just did. But the reality is, who cares, Bernie? I mean, the president could bomb Iran right now, and you can't stop him from doing that. The War Powers resolution doesn't go there. And yeah, for 60 days, he can do whatever he wants, essentially. But maybe that's okay. That's the problem. It's kind of like, okay, who is actually thinking about this stuff? I mean, I was listening to something on C-SPAN a few weeks ago where Josh Hawley was leading a hearing before a Senate committee on mortgage stuff. Not mortgage stuff, homeowners insurance. And I actually, I don't really like Josh Hawley's politics, but during this hearing, I was thinking to myself, okay, this guy actually sounds like he knows what he's talking about. And he's not just blowing smoke. So what you're saying is exactly right. I mean, we're in the middle of this incompetent administration. And I don't just want to make this all about Trump, but it's like, I mean, in world affairs right now, who is actually leading who? The Israelis are leading Trump. And Trump is playing into it perfectly. I mean, the Israelis now have 2 more weeks to bomb the hell out of Iran. Yeah. So if you're a peacenik, you kind of don't like that, right? But it's all lost in the ether.
Yeah.
No one cares. So it's interesting. I don't know where you go with that.
And I'm sure John, to put this in a Brackney way, for the friends of John Brackney in the world,
all 3 of them.
Yeah, you're stuck between dumb policies that sound smart and dumb policies that sound dumb, with both sides sometimes proposing something that, the occasional person, we sometimes end up lucking out and getting a good result somehow out of the chaos. But it's certainly no way to run a country. That's for sure.
Well, so we'll try to keep tying these threads tighter together so it means something. In foreign policy, president has enormous power. President's doing some weird things. Maybe it will turn out right. Maybe it will be World War III. And apparently he doesn't know because he doesn't know. And he tells us he doesn't know. No one knows because he doesn't know. So, okay, so we'll be patient, I guess, on foreign policy. Because the NATO, who knows what's going on with that? UN, clearly that's out. Maybe the BRICS happening. Maybe it's not. I don't know. It's China. You know this, I think. You know this answer. Is China and North Korea, are they true allies of Iran? Russia? I mean, are they allies?
I don't think,
potentially.
I don't think, it's funny. I don't think China has any true allies.
And neither does Russia.
Yeah, neither does Russia. So, but I don't think China or Russia has any interest in Iran having nuclear weapons. So I don't think they'll interfere in this at all. I can't think of any country that actually, the only countries that want Iran to have nuclear weapons would be other rogue regimes, because, sort of rogue regimes on the cusp, who are trying to become people who want to do evil, and
Mhm.
and want to be more aggressive with their evil. Those are the only people who want Iran to have a nuclear program, as far as.
Okay, I concur with all that. So thank you. Jake, did you want to jump in?
Well, yeah, it's kind of like if you think about Syria and how Bashar al-Assad got ousted a few months ago, like Syria was supposed to be really buddy buddies with Russia. Did Russia intervene to stop Assad from getting ousted? No, but they gave him sanctuary in Moscow. But it's like at the end of the day, it's kind of like the Axis alliance during World War II. Germany and Japan were supposed to be allies, but did they really help each other in the war? No.
Yeah, I mean that was a great Onion headline from my historical hilarity, hilarious Bible. It's called Our Dumb Century, which is the Onion coming up with fake news headlines for the entire 20th century. But it said something like Japan and Germany form alliance in well thought out plan. You sort of have two countries dedicated to their own racial superiority. It would have eventually been a problem.
Yeah. Okay. So that is funny, in a sad way. Okay, Professor. So we've settled foreign policy. It's going to be a mess for a little while, and maybe it will turn out all right, or maybe it won't. I don't know. Who knows? No one knows, right?
Yeah, nobody knows.
Okay. All
And
right.
here's the crazy thing. Let me defend Trump for a second,
Good.
because this is a rare occurrence here. Um, it might not matter because not I've said this, used this phrase before, but not every sparrow that falls from the sky is the fault of the United States. And we could have the world's greatest foreign policy president, the most consistent, the most thoughtful. I mean, I think about this in terms of like um, people who had incredibly thoughtful, coherent foreign policy visions that they wanted to implement. Maybe let's give three examples of this: Bush, Reagan, and Eisenhower. And in every single case, things happen that they don't, that those events and those crises will happen within the framework of that. And I would say that's always better. That would always be my preference. But that doesn't mean that you can prevent a 9/11 from taking place. Like that doesn't mean that I mean that the Hungarian uprising of 1956 becomes successful. And or we're going to end up supporting apartheid South Africa in the 1980s. In every one of these things, or you have to sort of manage the end of the Cold War. George H.W. Bush, maybe our most skilled foreign policy president in some ways. But having to deal with the end of the Cold War, masterful, amazing. But then getting stuck with the first Iraq War, that was, but also having to manage like the S&L bailout. You can be the best president in the world and still have problems. Um,
So you're just saying that humans are just infinitely complex and odd and weird and dangerous and stupid and kind and wonderful. I mean, it was just a mess. And
but I'm saying that in some cases things happen where you are just reacting, and presidents are going to be confused and not know what to do. That's actually uh,
fair. Okay,
yeah.
fair
And
enough.
I mean, and I think about, like, I would certainly take a Harry Truman um, over President Trump, but there were moments when Harry Truman was confused and overwhelmed and had no idea what he was doing, and he was sort of like, now here's where this is why you want somebody like Harry Truman over somebody like President Trump. Harry Truman sought out good advice. He wasn't surrounded by weirdos and sycophants and corrupt, narcissistic goofballs.
Okay,
Um,
that's a transition I got to stop you on. We got to weave in immigration more. So
okay,
you're a big fan of Stephen Miller.
no, I am not. There are very few Americans that I favor less than Stephen Miller. If I
Well,
was
I don't want
making
to
a
have
list of Americans who I
Guantanamo.
didn't like, I would probably put him pretty close to the top. I mean, he would certainly be in the top 1%.
So, Professor, I don't want to have you sent to Guantanamo or lose your tenure or something. I don't know what pressure Stephen Miller can put on you and your university. But what do you why do you have it so into for Stephen Miller? What
Because he's pushing our immigration policy, our immigration authorities to do something that is and will um, make mistakes with horrible and tragic circumstances. Because um, the quotas that he is implementing are so far beyond the capacity of our immigration services to implement that the only way to do it is by rounding up everybody and being completely uh, capricious and haphazard about it. Because and actually, I wanted to put this into some kind of perspective because, and some of this might be, and some of this might be shocking. So one of the things is I wanted to know how many people are wrongfully detained by ICE. you
hmm,
know, and believe it or not, there was a GAO report on American citizens who were deported, and there were about 3,000 of them in the late COVID.
already?
What's
There
that?
were not.
Yeah,
There's been 3,000 US citizens deported.
under the
Oh,
Obama administration.
oh, okay.
Because we wouldn't have a report on this now. This
Yeah,
is the kind of thing you have to do about the past. And so I'm like, so when people tell me, is it possible that, ICE is currently deporting, innocent people? I was like, yes, it's possible. We do it every year. So
right.
every year the ICE makes mistakes. I mean, it's a giant process, and the legal system is always making
Let me
mistakes.
get you off track for just a second, Professor.
Yeah.
And then I want you to go back to Miller and policies, but I want to interrupt you. I see regularly, if not daily, a U.S. infant or youngster is being deported, U.S. citizen being deported. And I look at that with I need more information because if the mom's being deported and the dad's not around or something, then the son or daughter's going with the mom, and we're not truly deporting a U.S. citizen. They're just it's more of a custody hearing, it makes sense that they'd want to go with mom. They don't have anyone else in America, whatever. I don't think that's necessarily evil. Where everybody else uses it as a talking point that this is evil. Can you give some insights on that? Because
Well, I
that's
would say, but here's what I would.
under
All
Obama.
right. First of all, I always say this with the both sides, but like, so in one sense, um, uh, there are always going to be mistakes in the system. And I will also say that many of the times that I've checked out these stories, they've turned out to not be true. Some of them are just completely made up. But there are actual people who are being uh, deported. And in every case, you could say, does the United States have some legal authority to remove this person? But there was a case of somebody, I think it was in Florida, where she was taken into custody while she was doing her check-in. You know, and that sort of thing only happens when you have somebody like Stephen Miller who's saying, look, I just need the numbers. And I need your office we need to be deporting 3,000 people a day. And I know that the reason, and this is why this is actually evil, is because it's just because they want to get to this number of 1 million in a year.
Yeah. Oh, of
Uh,
course.
and the Obama administration was deporting around 400,000 a year, and that was that was the peak of American deportations pre-Trump. Um, and even so, I'm saying, like, when you're deporting 400,000 people a year, you're even at that kind of a scale, you're making a lot of mistakes.
Well, and Professor, there was also more of a porous border under Obama, so there was more people coming in, more people getting immediately kicked out within that 400,000 a year. Now that
Right,
the
right.
border's fairly locked down, you got to go after other people that are just working and living, raising their family.
Yeah. And so what you are, you know, and what this leads to is it leads to a lack of prioritization because you're going to take resources away from targeting the people who should be removed. And when you're just going for this abstract quota, uh, in chasing this metric, what you're going to end up with is not getting the most dangerous people and instead deporting the most vulnerable people. And he's doing it anyway. And that is evil.
Okay, so Professor, I really, if you have this is more political science or social science than history, but I'd be curious on your answer because I'm searching for it too. I'm of the opinion that probably a majority, but I don't know how firm of a majority of the American citizens today, it may change after we keep hearing story after story after story of vulnerable citizen being removed. It might be going down. But I still think a majority of the American citizens don't have much sympathy for that. They don't care. They want the law was unenforced since Reagan, and millions and millions and millions, and no one seems to care. Kind of your point about tariffs and that no one cares. It's about damn time we had a rogue president coming in and just shaking up the things, and Miller's the blunt instrument that's doing it, and they don't care. If a million people get kicked out, even if there's some hardships and they personally feel sad for them, they don't care. And they can kick out another million next year and another million next year, and he may get elected president again. Well, you want to get elected, but the JD Vance would get elected president because he was so effective at kicking out 4 million immigrants, and American people might still be with him. Can you give a gut reaction to all this?
I
All
know
that's
what I would be saying if I was advising a politician to run against that person,
yeah,
which
talk.
is I would say what President Trump did is he destroyed the ability of the United States to go after the most dangerous illegal immigrants because he was chasing a number. And then I would show the stats of the dangerous illegal immigrants that he never managed to find or deport because he was taking money away from the authorities who needed those resources. And I would say, yeah, but look at all the people who still committed crimes. And then I would say, here are the crimes committed by the people he never found because he was deporting moms and babies. And I think the average American would actually say, "Oh wow, look at these there." And you could even find illustrative cases. I'm sure there will be some where you'll say, "Here are some dangerous criminals who evaded capture, and here are the horrible crimes that they committed under the Trump administration because he wasn't interested in actually removing dangerous criminals."
Okay, but
He
you
went
would
after moms and babies because it was easy instead of going after the dangerous criminals. And here are the Americans who were killed by those people. Or
do you think though? Do you agree with my premise that a majority, however slight, though it probably still supports President Trump and his initiative here? I saw this focus groups that I think it was Meet the Press that did a group of focus groups on immigration, including among Latino and Latina residents, and they're still with them. They think that they should be deported. So, what do you think?
I think it's always in how you frame the question.
Fair enough.
Because again, as long as you're not dealing with somebody who's conflating immigrant with illegal immigrant, but people who would say, if you frame the question this way, uh, who do you want to be deported? Uh, and you say, all right, somebody who has engaged in human trafficking, someone who has broken the law multiple times, do you want that person kicked out? Or do you really want to be rounding up the people who are trying to go through the citizenship process the right way, who just don't have full citizenship yet? Because there's a big difference between someone who is an international criminal and lawbreaker and
Yeah.
someone who is essentially a pre-American.
But Professor, it doesn't seem like the citizens have backed off on the Afghanis' change of temporary protective status for Afghans and Haitians and a couple other guys. They don't care. Get rid of the Afghans, even if they help the military.
I would say I would no. I would find that really hard to believe,
Okay.
especially if you're confronted with these people on a one-on-one basis.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's the other thing. Like when you talk to not some sort of abstract survey, but I would say, you know, put this person who served in the American military on TV with the American soldiers he served with,
I agree.
and say, we promise this person citizenship. And then don't leave it up to an anonymous survey question. Ask an individual American, do you want that person deported?
To go back and get executed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
And I find it really hard to believe that you would get the only people with I think you'd be talking about a 7% of Americans
Yeah, okay.
who would
And
still
I
say
think time will tell on this. I'm not so certain, by the way. I'm talking to a lot of people, and there's a lot of people that are still really mad at all immigration, any of it. They think we need to go back to just being Americans, whatever that means. Okay, and these are
well, I
people.
know, but I mean, but again, like the idea of not having any immigration policy is absurd. You know, but that is essentially the position being taken by both political parties right now, is that the
Right.
United States of America should not have an immigration policy. It
Media
simply
seems to
shouldn't
be fine with
exist.
that, Professor. Media seems to be fine with that. Higher education seems to be fine with that.
Yeah,
Banking seems to be fine with that.
right.
Citizens seem to be fine with that. We're just cruising along without a foreign policy, without an immigration policy, without a tariff policy. We're all just okay, I guess.
That's why when people ask, you know, who agrees with me, I always just say, I don't know, maybe me and 10 of my friends.
Okay. Um, Professor, I will tell you there is a theme of these no kings and all the other groups. Because I've talked to them. I'm telling you, if it wasn't for immigration policy, they probably wouldn't be out there like in mass. They're mad about Trump, this, that, and the other thing. They don't like his style. They don't like his personality. They don't like cuts to NPR. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons they're out there. But a unifying theme is they're madder than hell at immigration, Trump's immigration policy, whatever that is. And I'm telling you, that's about as cohesive of a theme as we just don't like it the way it's currently being done. Um, for whatever that's worth, I think we should be paying more attention to all those crazy people out on the streets, not the rock throwers, because those people come out at night. But during the day, I saw 25,000 normal American citizens who are all more liberal than I am, but they seemed like normal people to me. Do you agree with that, or like the LA people are actually more common than what I'm articulating?
I don't know. I mean, they don't know what, there's no, I mean, they're not advocating for anything. You know,
Okay.
there's no agenda. So, I mean, it's just a bunch of people saying, I have feelings.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay. I agree with that.
but I do want to say Jeff Dugdale just had a real-time fact check of the next GAO report that showed that if and I assume this is correct, that the first Trump administration was better than the Obama administration when it came to deporting U.S. citizens, because between that in available data ICE and they arrested 674 American citizens, detained 121, and removed 70 between um, 2015 through 2020.
There,
So that was
there was
actually,
also there
oh,
was
go ahead.
also a report in 2024 where the main finding was criticism of the record keeping of ICE. And I bring that up because in the report that I cited, they talk about ICE officers may determine that there's a reason that a person may be a citizen, but they're never required to update that once they've made that initial. So you notice in the quote that I gave, it's potential citizens.
So there
So
you
as
go.
with everything else, there is no hard fact that you can point to and say this is the reality, because there's always a caveat to it.
Right. I mean, and I would say, and if we're gonna tie that back into the larger theme of the show, this is something that is getting better, but or was getting better. It's unclear if what we're doing now, but we were getting better at record keeping and deporting fewer American citizens.
So, Professor, the last question point that's semi disjointed. My fault. Forgive me. You're advising American citizens, me and anyone else that listens to this show. Uh, Maybe Bart, he already has his plan. So does Jake. But me, you're advising me on how to be a more effective citizen historically in the context of our whole country and what we can do now in 2025 to be a good, valuable, devote, maybe a good word, or maybe it's not. Give us some advice. And I gave some, tariffs and foreign policy and immigration, and there's all sorts of other issues going on people are mad about. But what do we, what's our role in the world? How do we do something valuable? You and I are doing these shows. That's one of the things we're doing to try to get people to really think about issues. Is this all we need to do? Does everyone need to form their own little podcast, their own little group? What
I
should
would
be?
say this: if you really wanted, if what is it? Because I was thinking about it as you were asking, like what is it that would actually create political change, real political change, and it would be something on the order of, for the issue that you care about, write to your congressman. Make sure it's your congressman, not somebody else's congressman. Write to your congressman and say, uh, "I would like to know the immigration reform law that you currently would support. I want to know what that is. And please tell me the law that if this was, you know, being implemented, like this is what you would support. And if
Yeah.
that doesn't exist, will you propose some form of immigration reform?" Uh, and then I would say, I want to see the same thing for tariffs. You know, I would want to see the same thing for, if you think the biggest problem is, you know, I don't know, presidential war powers, ask about that particular issue.
Or
And
deficit and debt or whatever the issue is.
and just say like, I I'm one of your constituents. I just want to know what law you're writing or what law you're supporting on this particular issue.
And
And
you're
their
saying that
constituent services will tell you the answer.
but we know lots of real congressmen and have over the decades. You're saying that if a citizen takes a thoughtful letter that's a non-form letter and sincerely emails it off to their congressman, there's a chance that the staffer that opens it and reads it might have to pause instead of sending the formal form letter back, might have to scratch their head a little bit and
But I would also say, like, the other thing is like, fight the urge to justify or explain why you're asking, because that's where people can't help themselves. And like, I'm always surprised at how adults can't stop themselves from insulting people. You know,
yeah.
I'll tell them like, "Hey, listen, you're talking to a Democratic congressman here. Like, take out the part where you insult them 30 times.
Right.
Just ask the question, say, I'm a constituent, I live in this district, I'm concerned about immigration. I I don't I wasn't able to find an immigration reform package that you currently support. Can you tell me the current immigration reform package that you support?"
I think this is pretty sound advice, actually, Professor. I think it's simplistic, but it's actually I
I'm
think
just
it's
explaining the way the system is supposed to work. It seems profound, and I always feel like like my job in life is to just say the incredibly obvious thing,
yeah,
uh, that,
that's fine.
that apparently is like gone from public discourse. Uh, but
Pretty sure that if
I,
I just post something on Facebook, then that will take place of whatever you need to do, or what you're
but
suggesting.
then watch what the comments will be, because when you say something like that, everybody will immediately chime in with, this dictator king or whatever, and then like these illegal, and it just devolves instantly.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
John,
Jeff.
that is exactly why I don't post about politics on Facebook.
Yeah.
Despite you telling me to post about politics on Facebook,
Yeah.
because you don't realize how many progressive people I went to high school with that
Right.
would tear into me in the comments. And I'm like, I don't want to engage with someone I'm
Believe
never going to see again on Facebook.
And
Yeah,
I
believe
will,
this for 16 years since I've been on it, and I'm with you, Jake. It's maybe I'm giving bad advice to you, but I'm still going to keep giving it to you. Okay, Jeff, you have, except for your nice little ad, you've been observing this for an hour and 15 minutes. So you get the first bite at the apple to take any of those subjects, tariffs or Iran or any topic you'd like, and ask the professor a question or a comment on what we should be doing in society better. So it can be historical, it can be current. Just take any theme you want, Jeff, and ask away. And then Bart, you're up, then Jake, and then we'll declare victory.
Put me on the spot today, but I don't have a particular question. I think the advice you gave about your talking to your congressman is good, although I guess in my position, I could ask my Democratic representative what their plan is, what they support, and it may actually be of some value, but they are powerless right now. And so I'm not sure until that changes, it really goes to messaging.
Okay, let me interrupt, Jeff. What you think of a follow up if you'd like. I I think you're wrong on that. I am friends with several U.S. senators and Congress people that are on Democrats, and I truly like them. I know them. They know me by first name. We shake hands. We give a speech together or something. That happened just in the last couple months. I am frustrated that they, who are very powerful Democrats, they're not advocating something for DACA or Dreamers or a particular or protecting Afghans or protecting some person who's been here 20 or 30 years and have raised their family. They're not out there advocating problem solving. They're advocating that they hate Trump and his ridiculous whatever he said today. I see it on Facebook. U.S. senators posting something that they just don't like Trump because what he said. They're not advocating their cause. Why are they not doing that? Because they would persuade some people. They'd go, oh well, of course we have to protect Afghans. I mean, they're not doing. Of course we have to protect Dreamers. I think that they need average people. You're not average, but they need just American citizens to step up and say, here's what we should be doing. And why aren't you out there leading on it, persuading those persuadable Republicans? And there are U.S. senators that are Republicans that would go, of course, we're going to protect Afghans and Dreamers. And, and you build a coalition. You
I don't know that I don't know that I buy that. I kept hoping that the US senators were persuadable and they continued to follow lockstep much longer than I thought they would have.
Yeah.
Agreed. Currently, Professor, give a retort to this
Yeah,
conversation.
and I would say you're right if you're the only one who does it. But I was thinking in terms of like, what if you took every single person who participated in that protest,
Yeah.
and instead of participating in that protest, actually sat down and wrote a letter and put a stamp on it and mailed it to or actually, I guess probably be better with the email now that they irradiate the letters. But like
25,000 Coloradoans, a personalized real letter to their
real
congressman.
letter, not AI generated letter, to their own congressman that
weep.
every single one of those congressmen would say, "Oh my gosh, my constituents want me to govern."
Yeah, there's a
I
real
thought,
movement going on. Yeah.
yeah, but you're right. If it was just you, it would be nothing. It would be nothing.
Okay. So, Jeff, what do you think? Did we convince you to do it or not?
I guess that's a not because I have to think about it, but I will continue to think about it.
Okay, appreciate it. Professor, I still like your idea. I think we just got to hone our messaging a little bit.
Well, I mean, I think, let me now agree with Jeff. It's not going to happen, because the people who are most politically activated can't help themselves when they write to their elected representatives, and
That's true.
people are motivated by hatreds and their emotions. And but you asked for what would actually be constructive that people could do, and that's it. I gave you the answer knowing that it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Oddly, Professor, there's a young lady. The two of us made a little compact together, and both of us have kind of failed on it so far. But we're talking about this in the last month or two. We've said, hey, well, by the way, why don't we just see if we can get a couple other people to join us? There's instead of just one, there's two of us. Why don't we see if we can each get a couple more people to do something on
Yeah.
Dream? By the way,
And the
I
funny
mean,
thing is, sometimes the district director will call you.
uh huh.
So if you write an actual letter, like you might get a message from, I mean, you're not going to hear back from the congressman, really, but you'll hear back from his office in some way. And they might actually even call you and say, would you like to get together? Like those local offices will do that.
That happens. I
If you
concur.
don't seem like you're a crazy person, because the
That
first thing they're going to do is they're going to look you up. They're going to Google your name and look at your social media and see, oh, is this person in that case or
That is a fact. And by the way, I used to do that as 30 years ago. Yeah, I used to work down with Bart at the Capitol. He would be a lawyer, and I would be a constituent service person for state representatives. And
Yep.
Congress is what we need to be doing on this issue. But it happens. If it's a good enough letter, you go, "Wow, this person's neat." They might want to actually meet. And then the next time the congressman says, "Hey, pull together a group of 20 of our good constituents on this issue because I'd like to have a little focus group around them," and they go, "Oh gosh, that one person who wrote that letter, I'm going to invite them," and all of a sudden you are sitting with a congressman because you wrote a letter
Yeah.
a month or two ago. Yeah, cool. All right, Bart and Jake, what do you want to say before we close out today's edition of America's Great, but it's always been bad, but it could be better, but maybe not. I think that I should brand our that shouldn't be the conclusion of today's show. Bart.
Okay. I think, I think you guys were hitting on something a minute ago. And I know that it sounds as if what you were talking about is not going to accomplish what you wanted to accomplish. But I really believe, and I think that I'm trying to be optimistic, okay? Because I think Stephen was absolutely right. That, we all, I think, in our own way, need to become lobbyists. We need to figure out which elected officials we can actually, I don't know, have some persuasion with and try to make contact with them at some point about how we feel about stuff. Because politicians by nature, these are people who are worried, they get elected and then they're worried about getting reelected. They're not really original thinkers. They're acting like they're acting right now because they think that's going to help them get reelected, largely, except the ones who are retiring. So you can make a difference, and I really do believe that in this country, because I think, John, what you were saying a minute ago about, oh, if you actually write a letter on paper, someone might read it and they might go, oh gosh, this person's not nuts, I got to talk to him. Well, to be honest, John, that's what you did with me like 30 years ago. I mean, let's get real. I mean, John was a county commissioner. We were having a drainage problem in our neighborhood. I remember this. And I sent him an email and said, gosh, I think if they put a drain here and this water went down, it would help. Well, John actually talked to somebody in the public works department, and he kind of, you probably looked me up to the extent that you could. At that time, it wasn't like today where I had social media. This was in the 1990s.
Yep.
But that's exactly what happened. And you know what? We got the storm drain there because John talked to somebody and it happened.
And then you became a city council person. And I mean, and you're engaged a lifetime of public service professionally and civically. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
See, you're right. Jake, bring us down.
Thanks, John.
Come on.
No, I really like this idea that Tootle brought up of like writing to, my congressman. I just wish that my congressman was better. I wish that my senators were better. I have the esteemed Mike Lee as my senior senator, so not that good.
But even that with that office, like you say, all right, hey, Mike Lee, Like, he's not a moron.
He's not.
He's a smart guy, and he has good people who work for him. And you could write him a letter and say, I just want to know what your policy is. Just ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, come on, Jake. Will you do that?
Yeah, I can do that.
All right, share it to us privately, and then let's ponder. So, Bart, we've got one more. So there's three of us. Bart, how about you? Are you willing to give a shot?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, I'll do it too.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's now four. Well, Professor Tootle hasn't promised
Well,
to
I don't
talk to
know.
Dave.
See, I might be
Yeah.
seeing my congressman next weekend because he's at the same boat dock as my dad. So, and we're going
Nice.
up there in a couple weeks. If you can imagine that Victor Davis Hanson, my dad, and my congressman have all been hanging out at the same boat dock for 40 years. That's
Nice.
it's quite it's and you're talking about a community of 100 people.
Right.
That's a small group. Yeah.
Okay, you're going to do a personal conversation. Jeff, this was all a manipulated tool of mine to show you that if three other people are going to do it, you might be able to do it too. What do you think, Jeff? You willing to give it a shot?
So I'll clarify what I said. I don't disagree that doing that would have an effect on my congressman. I disagree that my congressman can have an effect thereafter.
Oh, fine. I agreed. It's
Okay.
a difficult world. I've worked on a lot of issues that some I solved and succeeded, and others I'm still working on, and it's been 40 years. So, okay, cool. But the question is are you willing to consider writing a personal letter that you're not stealing off Bart? That's copying in law school. That's plagiarism. And we would want you to do that. Oh, then in law, that's actually, you're supposed to do that. Okay, never mind. You can copy off Bart if you wish. Are you willing to do it?
I'm willing to consider it.
Okay, thanks. I'm kind of making progress. Professor, we're ending the show in 3 minutes. What would you like to tell us in the remaining 3 minutes?
I guess I'll also brag that my former students work in the offices of all three congressmen around here. So I have former students who hand me their business cards and say like, oh my gosh, I was your student
Well,
back
after
in.
you write our letters, then we'll check yours out too. Yours can be a note rather than an official email.
I still like to, I still do things old school, and it is funny sometimes I'll get a text message back that'll say like, why did you send this through official channels? I'm like, well, I'm still a citizen, I'm just a regular, I want to participate in government the way a regular person does.
Actually,
Even
that's
if I have your phone number. um,
that's
you know.
nice. Yeah. All right. What else do you want to end on? Do you want to say we didn't talk enough on tariffs or Iran or anything else?
Well, I guess I would say don't get down that um, we might be living in the golden age of planet Earth and we just don't know it. That is a distinct possibility. And if that's the case, we should all still really be trying to enjoy our lives and not find ourselves in a spiral of depression because of human beings aren't made to be inundated with miserable information 24 hours a day. So I'll feel bad about something, and then if you want to feel good about society, go to a swim meet. I mean, you want to know what you're going to see is a bunch of cute kids and a bunch of nice parents who are all out there just taking care of themselves and taking care of their families and doing all the wonderful things. So there's something, even though, trust me, I wouldn't do this if I didn't have to, but when you're out there setting up your tent with the thousands of other parents and you're seeing how they're all taking care of their kids, you're like, okay, this is a mostly good society full of mostly good people who are mostly trying to do the right thing every day. And it's important to keep that in perspective too.
Yeah, Professor, I happened to go to a swim meet last Saturday because it was the only time I could meet the person I needed to meet with, a pretty powerful person in town.
Yeah.
My kids, I'm here all day, just drop by the swim meet. And I did. And it was amazing culturally to see all these good, decent people and all the kids and tents and stuff. It was great. By the way, this is controversial, I guess. It will irritate Jake. I had that same feeling going to the protest. in downtown Denver. It wasn't scary. People brought their kids. I watched the SWAT people pull out like 40 or 50 cars and 10 on each side. I wasn't scared of them. All the protesters stopped for a little bit and said, "Go home, ICE," or, or something. It wasn't particularly intimidating either way. The cops waved back at them. I don't even in the protest, I was actually fairly optimistic about the country. Swim meet, yay, and protest, yes. All right, Jake, rip into me, and then we'll declare victory.
John, someone got shot at the protest in Salt Lake City and died.
Oh.
So
Yep.
that's kind of scary.
I believe you. And by the way, I admit that. But Professor Tootle's wise on this. You got to look at scale. There was between 5 and 8 or 12 million people out there. And yes, there's bad people that do bad things, but that doesn't mean 5 or 8 or 12 million people were scared or bad or whatever. There was some wacko person that killed somebody, which is horrible. But there's also a lot of decent people out there. Am I wrong, Professor?
No, and I would say this was one of the first protest movements that really was. It is sort of starting to. It did. I don't know, tip over into the realm of a lot of normal people were there. There were a lot of very average normal Americans at these protests, like who have been sort of waiting for some way of registering their displeasure and said, you know what, I'm going to set aside what I was going to do that day and go to this protest instead. So
And I've written against protests twice. I think it's like the least effective way to make your voice heard. I really like your email or letter writing thing, so I'm going to see how I can help with that. In addition of persuading Jeff, if I can't persuade him, I'm not going to go to the next 500 people I know. But I'm going to get you, Jeff. Professor, thanks for your time today. I'm really optimistic on our country. I know that sounds weird. My wife's probably mad at me for saying that. I'm
also
telling you.
great to see you, and happy birthday to everybody. We had Jake had a birthday and you had a birthday, and
Yeah,
so
my wife did.
yeah,
My anniversary's coming up in a couple days. I'm
my
looking for presents.
mom.
Big presents. Yeah, June's a good month, and then
Yeah.
coming on the 4th of July and 250 years of our nation, and 150 for the Centennial State, Colorado, 25 for our city, Bart. This is
Well,
a
you know,
lot.
I'm holding my own No Kings celebration. I'm going to have it on the 4th of July. And I
Yeah,
actually
nice.
celebrate every year, not having a king on the 4th of July.
Me too.
Yeah, it doesn't matter who the president is. I have my own No Kings protest every July 4th.
Well, let's put this on our calendar. July 4th of 2026, our 250th anniversary. We should all drive or fly out to California, stay at Professor Tootle's house. Do you have fireworks in California, or are they illegal?
Yeah, they're pretty much illegal, but yeah,
Maybe
I
we'll
was thinking, I was like,
maybe we'll have to
we
go to
could go the
Utah.
other direction and go out to Colorado
Yeah,
for.
exactly. You can do a lot in a lot of places in Colorado or Utah. You can probably have all sorts of stuff in Utah.
Oh
So
yeah, we should Utah, neutral territory, right?
There are enough Californians in my state.
How
I
dare
love
you?
you, Tootle, but I don't need more Californians here.
well,
Oh
on one
man.
day, Jake, he's not going to move there. Okay. Gentlemen, have a great day. Thanks for your time. Please keep thinking big thoughts. Let's help keep moving
Hey,
America
my
along.
mom has a house in Utah, so
Wait, who does?
my mom. My family are landowners in Utah.
See, that's an incentive for him to move here
Yeah,
now.
exactly.
All right, gentlemen, we got to go. Thank
All
you
right,
for your time. Really appreciate y'all.
take it easy. Happy birthday.